we are very pleased to have three fantastic, brilliant English wine producers here with us tonight. And this is all part of our Great British Summer campaign that we've got running at the moment to celebrate the wines of England. And this special offer that we have running is a really special curated case of 6 different wines, 2 each from our 3 producers here tonight. And they really showcase the brilliance and quality of the English wine scene today. So these producers that we have here with us tonight are first Julian Barnes from Biddenden Vineyards, which is Kent's oldest vineyard, in fact. Wendy Outhwaite from Ambriel in Sussex, who we started working with a couple of years ago. And Peter Hall from the tiny Breaky Bottom vineyard, also in Sussex, but a slightly different part near Lewes. So we'll be talking to each of them for just a few minutes to find out a little bit more about their lives as English wine producers, talk about their vineyards and what makes their wines so unique. And they'll also guide us through a tasting of one of the wines in the offer tonight. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Margot Carpentier, who works with me in the buying team, who is going to be chatting to Julian Barnes. Over to you, Margot.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So my name is Margot. I'm one of the members of the buying team at Corney & Barrow. Today, I'm really pleased to introduce you to Julian Barnes from Biddenden Vineyards. Good evening, Julian.
Good evening to you, Margot, and everybody else.
So before I turn over the floor to Julian, I wanted to make a quick introduction about Biddenden Vineyards. This multi-award-winning family estate has been initially planted in 1969 in the Wilden village of Biddenden in Kent. This makes it the oldest vineyard in Kent in southeastern England. Originally a 40-acre apple orchard, it was actually Julian's mum idea to increasingly turn the orchards to viticulture. So they decided to plant their first vineyard in 1969 and their first vintage was in 1972. The estate has gone a long way since their first vintage. Nowadays, the single estate covers 23 acres of vineyards, all planted on rich, chalky soils, on a gentle south-facing slopes, and covered with 11 different grape varieties. The estate is looked after by the second and third generation, led by Julian and his wife, as well as their sons, Will and Tom. So now, Julian, this evening, we are going to taste Biddenden signature grape variety, the Ortega, a fantastic aromatic white wine that won several awards. As some of our attendees might not be familiar with the Ortega, would you please unveil for us the fantastic specificities of this grape?
Yes. Well, the grape, as you rightly said, I mean, we planted this variety in 1972, and along with 6 others. But this particular wine shone out right from the beginning when we put it in the shop and started selling it. And we recognised very early on that the taste that we were producing that people liked, and we gradually planted more and more until the vineyard became 50% planted with Ortega. The challenges, obviously, with producing a wine over this period of time have changed greatly from 1972. I mean, not least the climate has moved forward, but, you know, by several weeks. I mean, you know, would be picking normally in October. In the early years, and now we have picked as early with climate change as early as the last day of August. So very, very varied. But the beautiful thing about Ortega grown on the soils that we've got here and in our climate is the fact that, you know, although you want to grow a variety of grapes really for as long as the season you know, for as long a time during the season as you can, to get the most flavours and to the most expression out of the fruit. But you do need some time in a maritime climate like this to make sure there's enough time for it to ripen in a bad year. But this, I think, is what makes English wine so exciting, and for everybody to have it on their doorstep, is because you can pop out. You can never say you've just tasted an English wine from a certain vineyard. You have to go back every year. Every year the weather is different. You know, last year, we had one lot of it. 2018 was very hot, and you had, very high sugars. But it's not always the factor of one of those things that makes the wine taste, interesting.
Yeah.
It's more about the combined flavors.
So you have some older vintage Ortega. Today we're going to taste the 2017 vintage. Have you recently opened maybe some older vintages and see how it compares with?
We have, but this wine that we're making at the moment, tasting at the moment, was, is a really good example of how a wine can settle down into its own, into its specific flavors. Some of the wines we make don't always, make this length of age. If you don't have the depth of sugar, the ripeness, maybe something, some of the wines want drinking a little bit earlier. But this particular vintage is absolutely lovely at the moment.
So tell our guests, like our Ortega from Kent should taste.
Okay, so I think the first thing, and you would notice when you pick up a glass of Ortega, is that it is quite golden. A straw colour, I suppose, that we would suggest. It is aromatic. It is from an early ripening variety. When you start to smell the wine, you notice that there is batrietal characteristics. So for our guests, I mean, those would come with the sweet wines, for instance. But they are characteristics that are in the grape Ortega. It doesn't like the rain at flowering time. It doesn't like the rain at harvest time. And all of these things add to the flavour. It produces it's a deep, rich wine. It's ideal as an aperitif. It's excellent to open, early evening, carry through to the meal that you're preparing, perhaps cooking with a little bit more spice, or really enjoyable sitting out in the garden in the sunshine. Ham, salads, quiches, sunshine, like it is here in Kent at the moment.
Actually, like not everyone has a glass of it, so maybe we could describe a bit the flavor we have. It's actually very aromatic, and it has beautiful nose where we can have all this orchard fruit, like typical from Kent, with apple, pear, bit of peachy notes, bit of elderflower blossom as well. And what is fantastic, so this is an off-dry style, and what is beautiful is like you have this very light sweetness touch, which is completely counterbalanced by the refreshing quintessential like English acidity, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
And yes, you've won a few awards with this wine, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, some wines are produced with huge expression, and you share them, and you need a few people to share them with. This particular wine, I think, it covers so many areas of what people might want to drink it with, from just being sociable. And I really have believed that Biddenden has put its faith in this wine, because it's a wine that you will open another bottle.
Yes. fantastic as an aperitif, and as you said, because it's very versatile, perfumed, aromatic, and with this nice texture, it would go perfectly with some food as well as like spicy or Asian foods. Well, Julian, thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you as well for the insights on the Ortega grape. Before I pass over to Rebecca, I wanted to remind everyone that in addition to the Ortega, your Gribble Bridge Rosé 2018 is also part of the Great British Summer Mixed Case campaign. This is a highly refreshing rosé blend of Dornfelder and Pinot Noir with fantastic summer berries and this refreshing, utterly British freshness. So thank you, everyone, and over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margot. Thanks, Julian. It's lovely to hear about those, and a fantastic excuse to drink some of your beautiful Ortega. Okay, welcome, Wendy. You're in the hot seat now. So I first met you, Wendy, a couple of years ago at the Wine GB, as it's now called, trade tasting in London, and I remember distinctly tasting all the wines on the central table and your classic Cuvée just standing out. And I was going up and down this line of wines and I kept going back to your various wines that were on that table, which was, you know, your classic Cuvée and also then the Blanc de Blanc 2010. I kept going back to them. It was like some catnip moment. And then I thought, right, I'm going to have to go and meet this Wendy Outhwaite, wherever she is, and eventually found you. And that was pretty much that, wasn't it?
Yep. No, since then we've been together. So a couple of years ago, we
absolutely. I mean, I found that in those wines, there was a sort of particular character, a particular Englishness about them. And I wonder whether you could talk to us a bit about that sort of particular Englishness which you so celebrate in your wines, and how do you achieve that particular flavour and aromatic profile and the texture of your wines?
Well, I think Julian put his finger on it, because it's all down to the climate. I mean, people don't always realise this, but we have the perfect Goldilocks climate for grapes here. It's not too hot, not too cold. And it means that we ripen our grapes over a very long time. And that's the key, that slow, gentle ripening. So it's like a Scottish raspberry. A Scottish raspberry is always going to be more delicious than all other raspberries because it's ripened at the northernmost point of where you can ripen it properly. So it just slowly puts on its flavors. And it's not just a huge hit of sugar and nothing else. And that's the key. So I'm sure you'll taste in all the wines that we're tasting this evening that you get amazing primary fruit flavors. So for the sparklings, I mean, it's like wandering under an apple tree in blossom. It's that appliness, there's lots of citrus, there's lots of stone fruit, and that's something to celebrate in the wines. But the other key thing is that our wines retain a freshness in them. And why that's important is not only can you sip it and not feel sort of, that's enough, give me something else, but also it lets it age. And for sparkling in particular, obviously the more time it spends on the bottle lees, the more delicious it becomes. So you need that sort of great British backbone, that structure to hold it while it ages. And I think, you know, just now it's so exciting to be making wine in England now. We've just got, I mean, we're just really, really lucky.
So Wendy, when you talk about the British backbone, I sort of want to call it a stiff upper lip, but it doesn't quite work. Can you tell us a little bit about that acidity? Because I think it's a really interesting point, also a little bit of a technical point about the importance of that acidity for ageability, but also the taste and flavour, but also the importance of aging and what you do, and we'll also find out from Peter in a little while, that's particular in terms of you know the malolactic element and why that's so important. And I think you'll explain it far better than me.
So Peter and I are in different bits of Sussex, but we're rare breeds in that neither of us do malolactic fermentation. And malolactic fermentation is something where you take your wine, and grape juice has malic acid. So that appliness, malic, the apple, is in the grape. And some people find it very tart. You know how it is when you bite into a Granny Smith? It's a big burst of malolactic acid that you're feeling on your tongue. And so if you just deal with the wines properly, you can just age them, and that acidity just gently mellows into the wine and becomes absolutely delicious. But some people want to do it more quickly. And so what they do is they add a little bacteria into the wine, and it changes the malic acid, the apple, into lactic acid, like dairy, and that's malolactic fermentation. So you get a sort of a creamier mouthfeel, and that's good. But what isn't so great is all those primary fruit flavors I was telling you about, the very thing that we get so spectacularly in England. It sort of, sandpapers them off a little. It makes the wines more uniform. So that's why we choose not to do it. Instead, what we do is we just keep the wines for much longer. So as you mentioned, the Blanc de Blanc, 9 years on the bottle these. Obviously not for the rosé. I know we're tasting a rosé today. We want some more fruit flavors from that. So that's only from 2014. But basically, we age the wines for much longer than other people, and that's why they taste the way they do.
Which is absolutely extraordinary, and it's also what some of our top champagne producers would do. For example, Champagne Delamotte and Salon, which we represent here in the UK, long-term partners of ours, but won't release a wine before 10 years because they don't put the wines through malo either. And they need that time, and they recognise it. But there are relatively few producers, I think, in England at the moment who are pursuing this regime. So it's very interesting that we have two of you here tonight. But it is a commitment, isn't it? It's a dedication.
Yeah, it is. It's very rare. So there are very few champagnes that will just age rather than malolactic, because of course it's much cheaper. You can bung in some bacteria, and there you go. 2 or 3 years later, you can release your wine. If you don't, if you just age it, then you have to keep it for much longer. But I think it really shows through in the quality, and we're really happy with the way the wines are, and we hope that other people agree with us.
Well, luckily I do. So do you have a bottle there with you? I'm just going to hold up this bottle told off by Wayne, our marketing guru. This is your the wine we're tasting tonight with you, Ambriel Rosé 2014. And you are going to tell us, as we taste obviously, why is 777 the magic number?
Because this particular wine is the 2014 Rosé that comes from rows 2 to 39 in the East Vineyard, which is one particular clone of Pinot Noir, and that clone is the 777. And we love that clone because of the flavors that it brings through. And as you probably know, most rosé that's sparkling is made by tipping a bit of red wine into a white base wine before secondary fermentation. But that's not the way we do it here. What we do is we handpick, obviously, the Pinots, and then we put them in the press, but we don't press it. We turn it every 3 hours for 36 hours, so it has skin contact. And then we take out the free run. We literally just open the doors, and that is the wine. We don't do anything else to it. So the wine makes itself, and I have to tell you, in the middle of harvest, when you're feeling exhausted, you kind of hold back to time your rosé production for a time when you just need a bit of a snooze.
Yeah, I can imagine. Can you just talk us quickly through the wine? We're slightly running out of time, but it's got such beautiful raspberry, strawberry fruit. I think you said it once before, wild strawberries and warmed raspberries. And I felt that that was so delicious. It was sort of like a summer pudding type scenario.
Someone cleverer than me called it a garden party in a glass, and it really is. It's slightly lower alcohol. It's sort of 11%, but it's a real sipping wine. It is, as you say, very fresh, very fruity, with a really long length on it. And the thing you see is people just smile. They just love it. So I hope your people do too. Please don't complain if you don't. Yeah, no, it's a really easygoing friend.
And it's got a beautiful texture as well, very lacy, and I think that's one of the characteristics that I found, this sort of lovely, fresh, acidity that dances across your tongue with these tiny little fine bubbles, and it's just delicious. But I totally agree, garden party in a glass. So Wendy, thank you, and to everybody out there. This wine is in the offer alongside Wendy's classic Cuvée, which is a sparkling wine made from Chardonnay and Pinots, and that is equally delicious. But we had to choose one, so you don't have to. Wendy, thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, Peter, I'm going to welcome you to the hot seat.
Hello, Rebecca. Lovely to see you. Yeah.
Very lovely to see you too. And, very good to move from one part of Sussex to another part of Sussex quite so quickly. So, Peter, we've been working with you too for a couple of years. I first came down to Breaky Bottom a couple of years ago, I think around this time of year. And it really is such a unique spot, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But you've been there, you told me yesterday, 53 years now. I mean,
I've been there for 53 years. Yes.
Tell me, can you tell, for the benefit of everyone here, where did you come from originally, and how was it that you discovered Breaky Bottom?
I know that everybody has 4 grandparents. Mine were French, English, Irish, and Italian. So a bit of a melange. But my first language was French, because I was born in 43 when the bombs were still dropping, father away with many other fathers. Maman était française, But I'm now a hermit. I don't really leave Breaky Bottom. Haven't been to France for 35 years. But my grand-père, Alex Mercier, had a restaurant in Soho, London, before the First World War. Very special, the Petit Savoyard, very famous, delicious wine. I loved him because he has my attitude. I mean, he likes perfection. So he never made any money, because you just devote your whole time to making everything as spot on as you can. So I think I've inherited that. And also my love for good food and fine wines. And a wee bit of whiskey sometimes too.
Don't we all have to, though?
Yeah.
How did you go from this background to come down to discover Breaky Bottom? How did that come?
Well, it's a discovery. Look, I studied agriculture at University of Newcastle upon Tyne, normal age, came down south again with a bit of Geordie in me, why I man, and a school friend of mine, I didn't know this area very well, a school friend of mine said, I know a guy who takes on casual work or co-work for a year. So that's how I came to the bottom of my long, bumpy track, Northeast Farm, and I worked there for a year. And then I very soon discovered that there was this desolate, abandoned, tiny in those days, cottage, hadn't been lived in for 50 years. And I asked if I could live here. And he thought I was crazy. There was no electricity, no telephone, stand pipe outside for water. He said yes, and I've loved it ever since. There. But it's a great thing in one's life. If something crops up, it's just a sharp turn you hadn't expected. If it suits you, just take it. And I love it.
So you just went with it. But did you see, how long was it before you actually planted vines here, and what was it? The love of wine that your grandfather?
Well, I always
gave?
had the love of wine, sure.
Yeah.
But when I was first here, I had a mixed farm. It was only 30 acres, small holding, and so I had pigs and chickens and sheep and Christmas turkeys. You know, old-fashioned mixed farm. Really, a step back into history, which is for my joy, really, because I love doing it. And then I went to my garden shop in Lewes, and the lovely shopkeeper we used to have a chat with and a smoke, he said, "Have you thinking of planting vines?" And he had a gardening magazine for that month, and on the back page, all glossy, "Plant your own vines." Nick Poulter, Isle of Wight, and he wrote 2 books. One is wines, growing your own vines, and one is wines from your vines, from your grapes. And they're still actually very well written, and the bare bones of how to do it from scratch, because I've never done it before. So I did it. In 1974, I planted Müller-Thurgau, which is a German variety, very good parentage, which made cheap Papa Ryan, Liebfraumilch. But if you don't crop it at 15, 20 tons to the acre, if you just have 2.5, 3 tons to the acre, it's a stylish wine. I made it like they would in Alsace, dried it out. And that was a very good wine. I also, alongside that, planted Cuvée Blanc. It's a hybrid. It's a transatlantic cross, which was bred in 1912, I think, for the Loire, for blending, making ordinary blended wines, just for the cheap wines. Vin Blanc, boom, Ordinaire. For some reason, at Breaky Bottom, it pleased me and a lot of other people. And I made still wine for 20 years, and then I've had 25 years of sparkling. But in my still wine days, Cuvée was very good from Breaky Bottom. I never know why. Other people grow it. Some like it a lot and make good stylish wines. Other people are antagonistic and they think it's rubbish.
You used to win. I mean, you know, you had a lot of followers, didn't you, for your still wines at the time, before you moved into sparkling wine. But did you feel intuitively that the potential for England lay for the great part in sparkling wines? Well,
you know, you must remember, champagne in the old days, before they put fizz in it, was still wine, and it was known as the meanest wine in France. I don't know if it was Henri de whoever it was, Henri de, coming through to the north, to La Manche, what we call a channel. He just said to his entourage, "For God's sake, bring some of our own wine, because they got bloody awful wine," you know. So, and yet there, the French don't do everything right, but what a triumph to go from the meanest wine in France to the most prestigious one in the world, you know. It's good, because their climate, their soil, very much like ours, and you know, like Wendy's and mine and other people's, Julian's, are just perfect for it, perfect. But I think fizz is king. I can see why the huge explosion since this century started, 2000, and really even just 2 or 3 years after that, the graph has gone right up for sparkling wine from England, and it's unstoppable.
So so it seems, and there are quality
really
has
yeah.
so many more producers with producing wine with so much more quality, I suppose, or perhaps it's taken more time for the vines to mature during the process. But certainly, you know, you've also planted in this century, the last 20 years, more of the traditional champagne varieties, haven't you?
Indeed.
I suppose,
Indeed.
you know, you've got a chalk soil.
Yeah, full chalk. Yes, I planted the Chardonnay and the 2 Pinots in 2002, 2004, yeah. And I'm happy to do that, but I've still got, I think, 2/3 of my grapes on this tiny 6 acres are Cuvée Blanc.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful sloping little plot, isn't it, behind the cottage?
Yes, yeah, it's amazing little tiny bowl in the middle of nowhere. I mean, people get lost trying to get here.
And as I know well.
Well, yeah, but once you know the track, postman comes every day, you know.
That's all you need. So can we talk a little bit more about what Cuvée does at Breaky Bottom, because it is particularly distinctive, and the wine we've got to taste tonight, actually, the Cuvée Koizumi Yakumo, is 100% Cuvée Blanc, and you make different cuvées that also may be 100% Cuvée Blanc. Also, you may incorporate it with the champagne varieties. But what is it about Breaky Bottom and Cuvée that it's hard, isn't it? This kind of concept of a sense of place and terroir.
Sure. Well, the honest answer is, Rebecca, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I tend my grapes. I know that Wendy was talking about malolactic, and it's, you know, if you leave your grapes to be as ripe as possible, just to add to what Wendy was saying about the acidity towards ripeness, it's true that initially, when they're not ripe yet, the malic acid is very prominent, just like picking an unripe apple off a tree. Naughty boy, you shouldn't do it. But the percentage of malolactic decreases as it ripens, and at the same time, the tartaric acid, much softer, much more palatable, that increases. So in fact, if you don't pick till they're fully ripe, you can actually almost beat the mallow, because you just wait and wait. I like risk. I'd rather wait and maybe lose some of the crop because the weather goes against, but I like to take the risk. My daughters love them. When they say to me, they taste the grapes one weekend and they say, Dad, you should pick. And I said, thank you, because that means I pick in a fortnight from now. You know. Yeah.
A deferred gratification, that's something my father told me as well.
That's how it works. Yeah.
And how do you, I mean, I first felt when I drove over the top of the down and into Narnia, I decided it was.
Yeah.
Atmosphere and about it, and we were talking the other day about Isabella Tree and Wilding. You know, how do you think that has, you know, been impactful in creating this particular atmosphere and perhaps added to this particular uniqueness of your place?
Yeah, well, what I found, I was tipped off by a friend. You should read Isabella Tree's book Wilding. And what I found was that all my life, I have acknowledged living things in the countryside, in my little tiny space especially, birds, insects, rodents, foxes, badgers. And what she's done is given me a sort of tutorial, an official, because she knows so much about what they have achieved there. We can't go on talking too much about it, but I would recommend anybody to read that book. It's very moving and it really influenced my life. I was just a tiny bit towards her and she's just opened the door for me. It's a wonderful book. Oh.
That's what I'll do later.
Well, you know, it's not just growing grapes, plodding everywhere. I like to do the physical work, the winemaking, looking after the vines. Very, very busy, but I also, part of my life is I love reading, I love music. I just like to understand other than what I'm doing. Yeah. In fact, you know, when I'm making wine, I have very loud, I have Schubert or Mozart or, you know, Benjamin Britten. Yeah, very loud.
Just very quickly, because I'm being told by Wayne, and he'll probably tell me off, but I'll just have another couple of minutes. We do just quickly touch on this wine, also because I wanted you, if you could, to explain, this is for everybody else's benefit, who is Koizumi Yakumo? What relationship has he got to you? And if you could quickly talk us through this, that would be great.
Well, I'll try. Yeah, Koizumi Yakumo was my great-great-uncle. He had an Anglo-Irish father and a Greek mother. He was born in 1850 in the Isle of Lefkas. So Lefkadio Hearn was his Western name. He was a brilliant writer, not very happy at home, went off at the age of 19 to America, fell in love and wrote wonderfully and sent lots of copy back to Harper's and got paid for it because he was a brilliant travel writer. In 1890, when he was 40, Harper's sent him to Japan and he never left the shores. He lived for 14 years. He died in 1904, but he was entranced by what he saw and he became Japanese, really. And, you know, I think I mustn't mention, no, I nearly said Amazon, but there are 40 books of his available now, so long afterwards. You know, and he was myths and legends and ghost stories that he wrote about Japan. He married his samurai's daughter and was lecturer at Tokyo University in English. An extraordinary guy. And I've just recently read his books. First editions I've got, and I'm blown over. You know, that's why he lives. And I'll say one last thing. In 2004, 100 years after he died, Japan issued postage stamps of him. You know, so what more acknowledgement? They love him, and they come and visit Breaky Bottom, especially if I've got Koizumi Yakumo to offer them. Oh, yeah.
Well, now we have two, but it's a delicious wine, and obviously you named it in honour of him. It's got a distinctive flavour and texture, so fine. It's almond character going on, and again, you know, like Wendy's wine, this distinctive Englishness, this acidity, which comes out, I think, in these wines that have been allowed to age and been sort of really crafted.
The aging is so important, and Wendy will know, and Julian and other winemakers, if you can possibly keep your wine, as long as it's sound when it goes into bottle, you know, it's a good juice, good wine. When it's bottled, as long as you look after it, right temperature, cellar it properly, you just wait. You know, I mean, this wine actually, I think I can't remember now, some years ago, when it was 4 years on the lees, it won a gold medal in the International Wine Challenge. But that's a long time ago now. You know, this has been 9 years on the lees. Wow. And it just goes on getting better.
Yeah, well, some and will continue to. And I think, you know, rather like, you know, the best champagnes, we'll see that in years to come.
Sure. But you're right, but if we compare what we do on the top of the top division, we've got to remember that non-vintage champagne is packed in on the lees for 12 months.
Yes.
15 months. And they're not looking for brioche and toasty and burnt toast and, you know, they can't expect that. But what they do is they've got so many in bottles, they whack them out. So it remains reasonable price to take off the shelf. But if they drink one of our wines, wow. Yeah, wow.
Well, I think you said it all. I think we've got to wrap up now. But thank you so much. You can find this wine in our offer as well as all the Cuvée Gerard Hoffnung, as well as in our great summer offer, and Wendy's wines and Julian's wines. But thank you all so much for giving us your time this evening, and thanks to all of you who have joined our Zoom to learn a bit more about English wine and fantastic quality and brilliance as we move into the future.